most commonly, they used it for Teflon, which is the lining on pans that you use to cook nonstick surfaces.
Damn.
Yes. And what they found was, so they were dumping the waste products into the nearby body of water, and it had started to kill this local farmer's cows. Through investigative work, showed the workers at the plant were getting cancer and having a lot of illnesses working around these substances.
They're finding canned soup studies have revealed 1,000 increase in urinary BPA levels after 5 days of daily consumption. That is scary.
Say that again, Doc, for people that didn't get that. Say that again.
So you eat canned soup 5 days in a row. Let's say you're sick.
Yep.
It increases 1,000% in urinary BPA levels. So you're just consuming those plastics like a summer gun.
That makes me want to take every Campbell's soup can in the grocery store and to toss it. Oh my gosh.
There's a reason why they're so cheap. You buy what you pay for.
That's awful, man. That's awful.
Welcome to the Functional Code, your go-to source for decoding optimal health. Join Dr. Addy and Dr. Jace as they break down the science behind pain, performance, longevity, and more, making complex concepts easy for you to understand and apply in your life. Your journey to a healthier you begins with understanding the Functional Code.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Functional Code. We are super excited to bring to you guys today's podcast. We're going to be talking about microplastics, all other types of plastics, and what that does to us, how they impact us. Now, this is definitely a topic that has gained more attention in the past few years, maybe even 5 to 10, but yeah. I would say there's a lot more research coming out on just the things that they're finding, especially in the human body regarding microplastics in the last few years. Yeah, stay tuned. We got a lot of things we're going to bring to you guys today. As always, I am Dr. Addy.
And I am Dr. Jace. Yeah, so we're going to dive into a few things in terms of some of the historic history of plastics and how they became to use. And then we're dive into even just some of the negative implications. These phthalates are small little chemicals from plastics and how they're impacting us in our body systems, effects it has even related to cancer. You guys have heard about BPAs, BPS. We're going to dive into that as well a little bit. And then even some applicable tools on how you can try to cut down on the amount of plastics, microplastics, and phthalates that are affecting your human body. As we're going through some of this, and Doc and I talked previously, you can't really completely prevent plastics. It's everywhere in the waters, the food.
Not anymore.
That point.
Which is so sad that we are given this environment from unfortunate, a lot of the sources that we're going to bring up and how that they were given to us. A lot of them knew about it. They didn't. Some of them knew exactly what it was going to do to us. Some of them didn't quite know what it was going to do. But now that it's already in mass production, obviously some of the things that we're going to bring up. One of them would be like carpet.
Oh yeah.
The amount of chemicals on carpet, especially new textiles. Back when they were first rolling that out, no pun intended, they didn't really know the health implications. They didn't understand that, but now we do, and it's incredibly unfortunate just how much of that is in our presence, like you said, everywhere. Doc, do you want to just touch on really what are microplastics and where do we find them? What's our current even understanding of the data as far as health risks and things like that?
For sure. So microplastics, these are just these small, tiny plastic particles ranging anywhere from 1 micron to 5 millimeters, just smaller than your eye can see, all the way up to something your eye can see. Even these nanoplastics are even smaller than 1 micron, which is unbelievable. But we're noticing this in these particles in the air, the food, the beverages, and now it's, as they're finding these in especially cadavers, animal, human studies, we're starting to notice these in the human body, including brain, organs, tissues. It's ridiculous and scary, disgusting, probably a good word like you said earlier, Doc, on that one. But a couple of key facts that I want you to start this thought process. phthalates, which are chemicals from these plastics. Phthalates are directly responsible for hormone disruption, leading to approximately 10,000 premature deaths annually,
Yes.
which is, just to start looking at from that side of things, is ridiculous. But let's almost take a step back. The historical use of these plastics and where they started from. So the post-World War II era, which more or less celebrated synthetic chemical innovations promoting plastics as an essential modern lifestyle, without even acknowledging some of the long-term consequences when they
Right.
first start off. And that was somewhere like, God, mid 1900s to even 1950s, to where it started to rapidly improve. Looking back at it from my perspective, the technology of what you can make plastics for and the utilities it can have, not only from a small business standpoint, but also the efficiency of any other product in all fields.
Yep.
It just improved the way and where we could live our life, but not knowing the negative effects. So you fast forward, the chemical approval processes now rely on the 1960s eras of testing methods.
Oh my gosh.
We're a little outdated by about 60 or so years. And with some of this stuff now, as we dive more into it in recent, there's definitely negative effects, and we're seeing it on many different areas. Even just the fact that styrofoam and other non-biodegradable plastics became common in the 1980s, and the environment can't break those down. We create
I want
it.
to say it's like thousands of years for some styrofoam products. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Terrible. The fact that it has not only ourselves, but even the environment, 80% of all plastics end up in landfills, with more projected in oceans, bodies of waters by 2050. It's terrible. We see this on turtles. We see this in the coral reefs.
Yep.
I know there's different machines being made to pick up all these plastics, but even the plastics in one side of the earth are picking up in different currents of oceanic currents that are then being processed and over from anywhere from Asia, Japan, all the way to the Americas.
Yep.
It's a true world epidemic.
It is.
It's not okay. Yeah, so microplastics, not fun. Not fun
You
at
almost
all.
feel, what do you do?
Exactly.
Like, because, I looked into this a little bit out, and I was like, we in the United States, we talk about what are the things that, we can do as a nation to try to improve this. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is we're actually some of the front runners of improving this. You take a look at true pollution in the world, and we've done a good job. Yeah, we could still improve, but some of the heavier amounts of plastic disposal isn't coming from us. And a lot of people think it's us because it's, we got to help our next generations. We have to improve everything. And it's not to say we don't have room for improvement, but a lot of these is coming from places that don't have good quality trash removal, sewer, like that kind of
point.
thing.
Very good
And it's just
point.
dumping. And it's because they have nowhere else to put it. And that is where I started looking into that. And that's even worse. It's, okay, how can we help here? We can't even help the other places that, in other countries that are unfortunately putting out a lot more than the United States is. And that's where it's, okay, now really what the heck do I do? How do I even affect other places that I'm not even currently living? That's where it starts to feel like you have this kind of weight on us as a generation to try to figure out how the heck are we going to make this change. And like you said, we'll get to what are ways that you can at least make choices, purchases, things like that might help your own self. Hopefully that then makes you feel a little bit better about it. But affecting the masses, it's going to take some time, and we got to come up with some ideas. Hopefully people that are currently already doing that are doing that. But yeah, there's definitely a lot that you can do yourself where these sources are. And so, Doc, where are a lot of these sources coming from, and what does that look like in, I guess, day-to-day life?
Yeah, and this is where we need to understand, and we do to a certain extent with some of the recent studies on what it's the impacts being done on the human body, so we have a good idea of a target to where we can, like you said, eliminate, cut down the exposure the best we possibly can as we go through some of this stuff. So There's a few studies that we have that'll break down and show you where and how and why these microplastics are affecting us more so. So they're definitely affecting our digestive system.
Yep.
There's a study that explored microplastics and the disruptment of the digestive system. It pretty much highlights that oxidative stresses, inflammation, and cytotoxicity as the primary mechanism. The study that they broke down was epithelial cells. They looked at these and they measured a couple things: the reactive oxygen species, or ROS production. They also looked at what's known as a transepithelial electrical resonance, or TER, was also measured in the epithelial barrier. And then they also looked at inflammatory markers of like cytokines, whether it's cytokine IL-6. So more or less it was shown that there was definitely damage to the intestinal lining. It triggered immune responses, which exacerbated gut inflammation, altered the gut microbiota, and potentially increasing the vulnerability for diseases. So that is alarming. Not only is it affecting how we are processing and digesting food, anyone that has inflammation in the gut, if you just start thinking about what you're consuming your food in or liquid in, if you go a different route, instead of staying away from plastics, quit microwaving plastics, leaving anything you consume in plastics out in the sun, oh my goodness, that'll help so much.
Yeah, and I want to say some of the crazy places that you don't expect them to be. I know Huberman brought up a study involving a soup can.
Yeah,
The inside of a soup can. Is that in here?
I think so.
Okay.
But yeah,
Just
that was
curious.
bad.
But some of the places you don't even know, like you don't even think about. The inside of a popcorn bag, believe it or not.
Oh, don't tell me that.
Yeah, dude, I
Don't
know.
tell me that,
I
no.
know. Like when I started researching this,
Oh no.
inside of an aluminum can, we knew that. We
Yeah.
talked about that in our water podcast. Like I said, carpets, tire dust, road, dust on the road from tires, on how that disintegrates, and then of course air moves that. And you could probably Google where all this comes from, and you'll find these just incredible lists of things that you just never thought about. And that's where, again, it's included in the beginning. We just can't get away from it now.
Yeah.
And so it almost, in a way, you just have to accept that you're going to be around it. But are there ways to limit or even try to improve maybe your detox processes in your body?
Yes.
All the things that you can do to just try to keep up your health. Because when you really, truly dive into this, you can't get away from it now, unfortunately, which that does stink.
So true. So we know that it affects the digestive system. Now, they also saw microplastics penetrating through the skin. This is definitely a scary part too. This is actually a study that was done 2024 and investigated microplastics and nanoparticles in terms of the penetration of the human skin. They use a couple different things in terms of this methodology for this study. There was an artificial 3D skin equivalent of an epiderm to replicate the human skin.
Okay.
So there's definitely certain parts on where we're more or less adapting and advancing into scientific ways that we can look at some of these things as the science of monitoring and assessing becomes more advanced. We're going to come with way more conclusions and influences with all these other microplastics moving forward. But yes, so the study used this 3D skin equivalent, this epiderm. They looked at microplastics in various sizes, and they were applied to the surface for different time intervals, anywhere from 6 hours to 72 hours. So they use a couple other things. In addition to that, visualization techniques, which is a confocal laser scanning microscopy, or CLSM, which tracked the depth of penetration of these microplastics. And then they also use an anatomic force microscopy, or AFM, which evaluated the skin surface modifications caused by these microplastics. And it was shown that microplastics less than 10 micromillimeters penetrated deeper into the dermal layers, and then also potentially entering the bloodstream. The surface modified these microplastics showed increased permeability compared to unmodified particles as well. So it's penetrating the skin at a deeper level in the deeper layers, which is potentially could get into the bloodstream through that way, especially with how small they are. It can pass through certain barriers way more than we may realize, which kind of highlights the point to these microplastics and any personal care products can lead to systemic exposure and potentially negative outcomes as well. So then you start thinking about, okay, what shampoos are we wearing? What toothpaste? What containers
And what do they
are
come
they
in?
It's
They
just,
come in plastic tubing.
yeah. Some shampoos come in a bottle, but not many.
Yeah, but it's a plastic bottle.
I'm thinking potentially glass bottle.
Oh, yeah,
Glass
sometimes,
bottle,
yeah, for sure.
But
Yeah,
spending on that.
yeah. I do order all mine, and it comes in glass.
Oh, smart.
But
okay, cool.
yeah, no, it sucks that the cost obviously is higher.
Yep.
But gosh, you start thinking, and that's what you'll end up doing. You start thinking back to all the things that now might affect you. And again,
Everything.
I can think of all the things I have in my house right now that I would be trying to get rid of. But I've already come to that conclusion where if I can't get away from it, how can I just completely adapt and improve my own body to not try to take the effects of something like this on? Otherwise, you're just going to have to live in a plastic bag, or not a plastic bag, a bubble your whole life.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you're gonna go nuts thinking about everywhere that these microplastics exist. But so how about
true.
cancer, Doc? Is there anything
Yeah.
with? I know that's an interesting one too, but
Yeah, so this was a study that showed the resistance against chemo affecting cancer with microplastics. And so the study explored on how the correlation was between the chemotherapy and the resistance, especially for colorectal cancer for this study. So the methodology that they used was they used cell cultures, especially these colorectal cancer cells. They're cultured and exposed to microplastics at a concentration of 1 micromilliliters, 10, 50. Then there's also, they looked at the gene and protein equation as well. And they did that through a qualitative PCR, which measured different expression in the resistance of the genes. They also looked at Western blotting, which is pretty much just a verified upper regulation of a drug efflux of proteins. And then they looked at chemotherapy response. So the treated microplastics exposed to the cancer cells. And they also looked at the viability of these MTT assays were. So pretty much through this study, long story short, they found that microplastics induced overexpression of this drug efflux proteins in cancer cells. They also found that increased cancer cell proliferation and survival under chemotherapeutic stresses were reduced. Like cancer cells exposed to microplastics exhibit 40% increase in resistance to common chemotherapeutic agents. So more or less, microplastics are fighting against the agents in which they're trying to kill cancer cells for this study.
and it might even be
colorectal cancer.
upregulating certain cancer
Yes.
mutations
Yep.
for resistance, let alone maybe increasing growth vascular. I'm sure we'll have more studies to come out with that too. But not only is it possibly promoting changes in cancer cells, it's also killing our resistance to help it.
Exactly.
That's
And looking at this as a parent for your kids moving forward, try to eliminate warming up any plastics, just eliminating as much potential long-term for you and your family. Because if you end up having cancer, God forbid long-term, if you have a bunch of microplastics in your system, the chemotherapy in which they use, theoretically, and where it's looking at with this study, are going to be fighting against just the effectiveness that it can cure and help against your cancer.
And I bet you it'll take hours to read through all the places in your life that you might have access to, all the chemicals, all the, you can't get away from it. It's
daunting.
It's tough. Do your best. If you still feel like you want to completely just live in the woods, I get it. So yeah, next one,
Gosh,
female
yes.
reproductive health, Doc.
Yeah, so with this, they looked at the microplastics and how it affects female reproductive health. So they use, for this methodology, human samples of follicle fluid samples, in vitro fertilization or IVF patients, pretty much were collected to detect these microplastics. They use animal models as well. There's also hormonal assays where they looked at estrogen, progesterone, anti-Mullerian hormone, and they use this measuring the ELSA. They also looked at histological analysis as well. So the findings were that microplastics impaired the ovarian function by disrupting the follicular development. It's also altered hormonal signal pathways due to endocrine disrupting properties of these microplastics as well. So it's scary. We're starting to see microplastics were detected in 15% of ovarian follicular fluid samples from these IVF patients. So it's been detected in 15% of them, which
that seems low too. Some of the other studies that we talked about in the past, I know
everything.
The brain study that they did showed, I think, well over 90% had found microplastics in the cadaver studies they did. And then I know one of the most recent ones on testicular studies showed, I think one study had 100% of the cadavers had microplastics in their testicles. And then I think another one came out with lungs. It showed a certain amount were collected in lungs. I know that there was a documentary a while ago that showed like over 70% of the birds that they had collected in this area that had passed away, over 70% had plastics in their stomach.
Scary.
Yeah, and that's the hard part is just the true epidemic that you mentioned, that what's happening is it's affecting everything.
Yes.
And if we can't do anything about that, what are we going to have in 50 to 100 years? And to think
human
about
evolution.
To think about that, right? Like what we did to our planet, unfortunately.
So true.
All right. So yeah, this was next up one is on lungs, actually. What did that look like, Doc?
So this was a study titled "The Effect of Nanoplastics and Microplastics on Lung Morphology and Physiology," which was a systematic review. So it was a collection of 23 studies focusing on airborne microplastic exposure. And they pretty much found that microplastics accumulate in the lungs and cause this chronic inflammation, thus leading to increased risk for pulmonary fibrosis, which increases with prolonged exposure over time. So as we live, just increases the opportunity and chances from there. Pretty much nanoplastics were shown to induce stronger inflammatory response compared to microplastics. The smaller nanoparticles were worse than microparticles.
I wonder if that's just because they then now have the ability to migrate.
Yeah, get into different areas through the blood-brain barrier. I'm sure there's so much.
The bigger particles maybe got caught up in our skin or other places that we were able to, I don't know, just curious.
Especially through 23 studies. So we're seeing this in the lungs. Now, subsequently, you'd think, okay, we're probably going to see in the cardiovascular system as well. And sure enough, we're seeing microplastics and nanoplastics embedded into arterial plaques, which then is also affecting cardiovascular diseases as well. Just, it's one thing after the other, it seems. It's unbelievable. And then we looked at microplastics affecting the water, and we're even seeing with some of these microplastics were found to harbor multiple these ARGs, which are short for antibiotic resistance genes. They found that increasing environmental and public health risks. It's fact that we're 3 times higher in the surrounding waters. So we're finding it in any of the nearby water sources for most places. You gotta get away from it. We're gonna get into a few things as well that can help out on that side of things, but there's a lot of limitations.
That's where I was first introduced to this idea, which was this movie called Dark Waters. And it's about the story of DuPont and how they came up with the creation of PFAS, or forever chemicals.
Yes.
And if you go and watch the movie, it shows how they knew about the actual effects of PFAS in the 60s on humans, and still chose to go through with production manufacturing of this chemical. Most commonly, they used it for Teflon, which is the lining on pans that you use to cook nonstick surfaces.
Damn.
Yes. And what they found was, so they were dumping the waste products into the nearby body of water, and it had started to kill this local farmer's cows. Then through investigative work, showed the workers at the plant were getting cancer and having a lot of illnesses working around these substances. Fast forward to a litigation issue now where there is this one lawyer who is working for free to take these individuals who've been affected to court and get restitution from DuPont, which has continued now for I don't know how many years, but he's been doing this for many years for free just to help these individuals. And I think so far it's 1.2 billion in restitution that DuPont has had to pay to these individuals for their health.
So sad.
And so in that movie, you'll also get a underlying feeling of doom when you look at what is going on behind the scenes to push a lot of these products to market without any real advancement in safety and regulation. Like you talked about, we're still stuck in this 1960s post-technology rating system for health and safety. But you also look at last year, I believe 2023, 3M, which unfortunately is a Minnesota company, paid $10 billion in restitution for they directly correlated the polluted water sources around it. I don't know if they're dumping or what happened, but they were at a $10 billion restitution that they paid because they were directly tied to polluting water sources with certain PFAS and forever chemicals. And now lastly, I think last stat I looked at was, I think in total since they've started trying to get restitution from these big companies, I think it's at 20 billion in restitution. And I think some of these companies make that in a quarter.
That's incredible.
So
Incredible. Okay, shoot, I can't imagine how much has been done even prior to that, even before us.
yeah,
as well,
and
even looking at
now
that
it's
side of
just are we early enough on in a fork that we can start making a change, or was the fork back in the 80s and we just unfortunately didn't really realize what we did in that time, and did we create a change so drastic that we're not going to be able to? I don't know. But what I do know is they know that almost every human, a certain amount of human, I can't remember if it's every human, but a good amount of humans does have some sort of forever chemical in them now.
Wow.
That will be in us forever. Our body can't get rid of it.
Unbelievable.
And that's what PFAS is, unfortunately.
Huh. Interesting. It makes sense working in with these microplastics,
Yeah.
nanoparticles. There's so much small stuff in our environment that is affecting us on such a minute level, but it's having a huge effects. And in fact, we're actually seeing it is actually affecting and is an endocrine disruptor, especially these BPAs, BPS, phthalates.
And this is the canned soup thing I was talking about, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Yeah, so BPA or bisphenol A, which is actually found in canned soup linings, has been shown to cause hormonal disruption linked to elevated urinary BPA levels after consumption. Even BPA-free products may still contain BPS or other harmful substitutes with similar endocrine disrupting effects as well. So we're seeing it, God, whether it's BPA-free or not, you probably want to stay more towards glass products the best you can there. Even phthalates, which are these small microchemicals from the plastics, is used to increase plastic durability and flexibility. They've been shown to disrupt testosterone and estrogen pathways, affecting reproductive health and general hormone balances. So they're finding canned soup studies have revealed 1,000 increase in urinary BPA levels after 5 days of daily consumption. That is scary.
say that again, Doc, for people that didn't get that. Say that again.
So you eat canned soup 5 days in a row. Let's say you're sick.
Yep.
It increases 1,000% in urinary BPA levels. So you're just consuming those plastics like a summer gun.
That makes me want to take every Campbell's soup can in the grocery store and to toss it. Oh my gosh.
There's a reason why they're so cheap. You buy what you pay
just
for.
awful, man. That's awful.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever eat out of a canned
No.
food
No.
again.
No.
Unless it's emergency or I need to.
Ugh.
Yes. They're even finding in paper cups, especially with hot liquids,
Oh, for sure.
leading into microplastics, also being endocrine disruptors from the cup's lining itself.
That's why I hate drinking out of a water bottle, plastic bottle.
Yep.
And if I have to, if I ever leave the water bottle in the car, I never drink it. Because I just know if it heated up, that plastic release, just all the things. Gosh.
It's tough because there's
Like you
even
can't
those
go, no
water
matter
bottles
where
are
you go,
spendy.
no matter where you go,
So true.
you start looking. And then you're just thinking about, if I was given the option, what would you have done differently? And it's like, the canned soup people would be out of business if we truly knew this.
So true.
Camels wouldn't be a thing.
It would have to be glass bottles.
Of course they're going to hide this
that.
from us.
Yep.
They aren't going to lose millions from this kind of information.
God dang. Even the part that I thought was interesting, the plastics in microwave containers. So let's say you buy a microwave meal, more times than not it's plastic. There's plastic overlying.
Yep.
I know I'm definitely a culprit of this, more frequent than I'd like, but after now, we're going to switch things up. Even the covers that you put and heat over, maybe let's say a glass container of food's there, those plastics can still bleed into
Yeah,
it.
so it's not, our food isn't dirtying the microwave, you're saying that? Yeah, absolutely.
It's all about the plastic. So any limiting factors, try to avoid any plastics where your food is being stored in a frozen meal, whether that's being stored in a plastic container in a refrigerator, and then just don't warm it up in the plastic. Put it in a glass or different
Or on a
microwave.
plate, like a porcelain plate or something.
Porcelain, yes. Yeah. So we're seeing with all this stuff, it has effects, and it's affecting males, females. For females, there's the miscarriage rates and lower fertility. For males, it's actually reducing the taint size between the genitalia organs and then the anus. It's been shown to have smaller penis and testicular size, lower sperm counts, and also declining fertility rates. So we're getting attacked not only from the environment, from the plastics, but even, I know we touched on this, from the social connection as well. Individuals and relationships and couples not having as many kids
Yeah.
as whatnot. It's definitely going in the wrong direction.
Well, I know as males, our testosterone rates are plummeting in the last 60 some years, and it's looking pretty grim to try and improve our birth rate in the country, especially if we are going to already meet this, what Elon Musk states as this crisis of population that we first thought, a while ago, thought that the world was getting too populated, but that's just not the case. We're actually starting to trend in the opposite direction. And if we aren't keeping up with the birth rate, then that's going to be significantly an issue come down later in the timeline of the world. But will we get to a point where infertility is so common that, I don't know, but gosh, that's just, we can't get anywhere. And not only that, not only low sperm count from hormone receptors, but low sperm count from obesity and the way that big food and other things change our health and outlook. And yeah, you just can't get away from it.
It's so bad. So we're knowing that these phthalates, these small chemicals from these microplastics and exposure has affected and disrupted both genders, male, female, especially particularly in adults 40 to 60 years old, especially when plastics were in the environment, it has been used. They're starting to see the effects later on in life, which probably is partially related, I'm sure, to cancer rates as well, that
we can't
just not
say
slowing down.
We can't say it because they won't let you believe it, but there's you can't not believe that after reading all of this.
So true. If you guys want to look up any of the work, Dr. Shauna Schwann's research, she has a book out called The Countdown, which links phthalates to hormonal disruption and declining reproductive health in humans and animals. Nice. She was on Joe Rogan's podcast and discussed a lot of this more in depth, so I'd suggest looking at some of her material as well. She'll dive more into the in-depth aspects of things there, but yeah, I think when you look at this, where are ways that where we can either detox or we can help reframe in reducing these exposure to
Yeah.
these microplastics.
Yeah, yep.
And I know we touched on a bunch of different types of material, especially trying to avoid any type of other plastics. So it'll come from a lot of that side of things. But let's say we want to detox our liver the best we can. There's different types and ways that we can go about it, whether it's you go to any different liver detoxification. I know they have one through standard process, which is pretty good. There's other ones through other different companies. Maybe once or twice a year going through a detoxification, by all means, can help significantly on that side.
I know that you could Google phase 1 liver improvement supplements, and then you can Google phase 2. You can
yeah.
really dive into this. And there's so many functional medicine providers who talk all about this. And you can do chelation therapy that
good point.
truly boosts detox. Again, we're just giving you the information. I would recommend you work with a physician on this.
Yep.
When you start to play around with detoxification, chelation, things like that, it can get a little hairy. So please read and research yourselves, but also in the end, I would just recommend you go ahead and use a physician who's done this before, because the physician I worked with who did this on patients, we saw some things. When you start to truly try to grab these toxins from your body and remove them, if done, it works well, but there are still plenty of times where the body just, we remove the toxin from the adipose tissue, but it isn't quite cleared. And now it's out in the system, and we tend to get some certain side effects from that until we clear it. So you don't want to get through this harmed at the end, or maybe having certain side effects. But does it make a difference? Absolutely. And I'm sure there are plenty of functional medicine providers out there who are putting good information out there on this, because I know that many people do need this kind of stuff, especially even pesticides and heavy metals and all the other things that you would detox for, not just obviously plastics, but yeah, it's super helpful.
So true.
So Doc, in terms of, I guess, away from supplementation, there are just some simple things that you can start to do. Do you want to just talk a little bit on some tools for that, as not only for what we can consume, but maybe how we reduce our exposure as well?
Yeah, good point. So with the detox part and the benefits with that, they're showing any cruciferous, any type of those vegetables, and any sulforaphane, more or less vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower can enhance the phase 2 of liver detoxification. Looking at maybe more greens in your diet, but especially potentially both of those on a maybe more of a consistent basis, working into your diet will help significantly. Also, awesome consumption tips, light cooking, whether it's steaming or pan frying, preserves pretty much the nutrients within some of these cruciferous vegetables. And even supplements with sulforaphane are an option for those that are not consuming enough vegetables as well. So you can look at the supplementation route on that side. But when you look at in terms of trying to avoid these BPA types of plastics and the exposure, huge one, avoiding bottled water and canned soups, obviously.
Easy choices to start, for sure.
And I feel like it always comes out better, any type of liquid that you're drinking, in a bottle, a glass bottle, versus a plastic container.
I do. I enjoy the taste and the experience better in a bottle. I don't know. I just do.
I'm right there with you. I know they have even shaker bottles that are glass, but they have a plastic outer line. I almost went a cheaper route and got a glass exercise workout shaker bottle, but there was like plastic around there. I misgrabbed it. It fell on the floor, shattered everywhere.
Really?
And I was so depressed. It's
So,
like so good,
they're
but
making
yeah.
glass shaker bottles.
Yep.
That's nice.
Yeah.
I
A
like
little
to do.
spendier, but,
I do steel.
Smart.
Like,
Yeah, that works.
you know, that's still. I got, obviously you got your Hydro Flask, your Yetis, all that stuff too. But
There we go. It's obviously we know that side. Now, in terms of filtering out some of these chemicals, reverse osmosis water filters, and then storing in a glass container is probably one of the better ways that we can tackle and eliminate some of these microplastics and any or phthalates subsequently as well. And even, I thought this was interesting, carbonated beverages. Some brands of carbonated water, including glass bottled options, contain significant microplastic particles.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes sense from the inside of the cans on that side as well, so avoiding those.
yeah, there was a big study that came out and showed the top brands in order of the higher amount of contamination versus the lower. And unfortunately, I think Topo Chico was number one.
Oh, wow.
Which I enjoy Topo Chico. It was purchased by Coca-Cola, Topo Chico, so
Sure.
there might be something to do with that. But I want to say the better carbonated water brands that had the least amount was Spindrift. Spindrift, I think, was a really good one. And then I want to say Waterloo maybe was another one. I'd have to look. You can definitely find that. If you Google it, it'll show you the brands in order that ranked from highest to lowest. But it does suck because Topo Chico does come in a glass bottle. So I don't know if it's the processing or what that looks like. But I do know that if you look into these companies, unfortunately, you will see a history of contamination. Bigger brands like Coca-Cola, you obviously have that. But yeah, it is interesting.
It's unreal. Okay, let's look at some of the practical tips in addition to some of the stuff that we touched on too. In terms of cooking and storage, using a cast iron or ceramic cookware. Avoid nonstick pans, which interesting. That's good to know, especially that lining.
That's Teflon, which I would say is one of the main sources of how forever chemicals got into humans.
That's what you're saying.
And that was huge. Everyone used it back. When it came on back in, I think it was like the 70s or the 80s, it was one of the hottest selling items ever. Every single person bought one because they're like, wow, this is, you don't have to clean it. Like it truly changed people's lives in a way that you didn't realize you were getting changed. And now, unfortunately, it's still being sold. Not many people know this.
It's always almost more expensive nonstick pans too than just the normal pan.
We have a ceramic cookware. We use all of our cookware, and as long as you put some oil down, you don't have a lot of issues.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
don't.
Clean process maybe a little bit more time, but
a little bit. We use the steel wool.
Oh yeah,
It takes like 3 seconds.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it's a little more elbow grease, but it doesn't take long at all.
A little workout with it. In addition to a tip, microwave only on glass or ceramic plates, not plastic. I know we touched on that. Bottled water versus plastic. I know we touched on bottled water. Obviously, anytime water is stored glass container in sun exposure for longer periods of time, you start getting those small phthalates induced into the liquid, and then the consumption then obviously happens from there. Again, monitoring that a little bit more. Now, other areas that you can start looking into would also be sauna use. So you can help sweat out potentially other chemicals there.
I'd say that's a great place to start actually with detox.
Beautiful, okay.
I get it. You're going to eat really well, try to improve those systems of the body, avoid exposure. But if you're truly wanting to make a change detox-wise, sweating is almost the primary area of expel, other than your other emunctories, which would be making sure that you're having a bowel movement, those kinds of things too. But yeah, sweating, that's got to be the first place I would start if I was going to try to detox.
Yeah, and I know we did a podcast on heat therapy. There's a bunch of awesome information there, so go check that out.
Yeah, that was a popular one. A lot of people like that, which is great, because I love saunas. I freaking love saunas so much.
So good, man. Yes. So I know you said screening out material, whether it's food, liquid. So increasing fiber intake can also help those chemicals bind to the molecules for extraction as well. So fiber intake, beautiful. And then even clothing and microfibers. So reduced new clothing purchases to minimize microfiber shedding. I think from that side, we're probably not going to get around it, but just to pay attention.
But they're finding like Temu brands, if you're ordering, they're having like 5 to 10 times the amount of PFAS in the crotch and the other regions. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And I know I've seen the previous like Lululemon and females that wear just leggings with no undergarments, underwear.
There's an increase in
Yep.
And that's tough because
incredible.
You're not going to go naked every day. So but go ahead, you can finish this and then I'll get to what I was going to get to.
And then even there's other filters that they have for washing machines that help also for the release of some of these fibers as well. I haven't looked into that too much myself, but I know it's definitely out there.
I haven't either. But I was just going to finish with, I think where you truly look at where you're finding a lot of these things that you don't think you're finding them. For me, it was carpet, number one. And so when I move into a new place, I try to find the no carpet, hardwood only.
Smart.
So that is something that I think about. You think about it with upholstery on your couch. So textiles, things that upholstery and bedding and sheets and things that have fibers, that's what you got to think about too. So I know the Liver King, which I don't know why, this is what reminds me of what he said, but he only has leather created from the animal upholstery on his couches.
Interesting.
And so his couches and all of his, I guess you would call it, his furniture in his house was created from the animal skin and then put into a shaped form of a couch around metal and wood.
Cool. Interesting.
To truly eliminate any microfiber, any synthetic textile that you could create. And then I know you have to upkeep it a certain way, but there's that route if you really want to get gung-ho on it. Any type of synthetically made, I shouldn't say synthetically, but like sheets for your bed. Not all of them are 100% cotton. So some of them might have some extra sources of...
Probably why silk was used way back then from like these silkworms, and then used all the way from like ancient times.
Yeah,
even,
I don't
supposedly.
know. And I haven't yet to look into that research of what is best. Those microfibers, when they're made in the plant, what microplastics are falling into those fibers as they're creating this for you on the manufacturing plants themselves. These are just all the things that you got to think about. But when you get to that point in time and you start looking around, you're like, it's probably everywhere. The chemicals that you wash on your surfaces and the clothes you're wearing and where they exist around you. So that's just, like I said, the insiding of a popcorn bag you didn't even know. Yeah, I know that movie Dark Waters, at the end of the movie, showed a tremendous amount of places you didn't realize that you had them. But yeah, really what I landed on was, if I am going to exist in this world and not go crazy after hearing this information, all I'm going to do is focus on improving my health every day so that I can exist in this world of great technological advancement. Yes, all these things are making our lives so much easier, and I am grateful for that, but at the same way, I almost wish that we had a little bit of that hardness to us, because I think I'm okay switching that off with the health that I would rather have from the easiness of these kinds of chemicals. But that's my 2 cents.
So true. Yeah, I think, brief overview. Sauna use, regular cruciferous vegetable intake, avoiding plastic containers on where you store or buy your food in. I think just with that, some of that stuff will help long term, but can't necessarily get
And if you want some extra help, there are some physicians out there who do a great job. There's plenty of testing that you can do, and it gives us a little bit more information of where to start. With that is all we have today. We took a lot of this information from other individuals out there, so if you guys have more questions, please look into that. We prefaced who we took a lot of this information from, and then obviously with our own experiences. So with that, again, thank you guys so much for watching and listening if you are on Spotify or Apple Pod. Again, we thank you guys so much, and until next time, you guys have a great day.
Disclaimer: the content provided in this health podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast is solely at your own risk. The creators and hosts of this podcast are not responsible for any actions or decisions you may take based on the information presented.
Thanks for joining us on The Functional Code. For more evidence-based health insights, subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, your journey to a healthier you begins with understanding the Functional Code. Until next time, stay well, stay informed, and embrace the science of living well.